welcome to the Elephant's View, the cable digital broadcast of the Marshfield Republican Town Committee. Today's topic for discussion is becoming a candidate, eliminating one-party rule. And there are few guests who can speak to this as well as the guests that we have for you today. State Representative Ken Sweezey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for being here. This topic about one-party rule in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has had one-party rule for more than 30 years. I call Massachusetts a decoy state. It pretends to be one thing, but it's actually another. It claims it has two major parties, Democrat and Republican. In reality, it has one. And when a state has more than one party, but when only one party is in charge, it is called one-party rule. And amidst a handful of Republican governors, the legislature has been Democrat dominant since 1992, and that's probably a number that I might find on your birth certificate.
Very close.
Very close. Or you're not going to tell?
94, I'll say.
All right, yeah. 94. Wow. I mean, that really proves our point, doesn't it here? Now think about this. In the last 10 years, Massachusetts has seen about 284,000 people leave. That's about $20 billion in lost income. People say they are leaving because of the exorbitant cost of living, the high taxes, unaffordable housing, inferior public services, an anti-business climate, illegal migration, increased crime, and unresponsive representation. But in the Elephant's View, we see this differently. We know the root cause is one-party rule, lack of political competition. This has led to authoritarian governance, limited civil liberties, and reduced accountability. It can even lead to abuse of power. This is a problem, but it's not just a problem for Republicans. It's a problem for the people of Massachusetts who want lower taxes, lower energy costs, accountability, and responsive representation. Think about 72% of people voted for the audit, and the majority of the legislature is doing everything it can to stop it. That's one-party rule in action. Well, this year, and actually every 2 years, voters have an opportunity to change this, to return Massachusetts to the highly attractive and economically vibrant state that it once was, proud of its record of protecting individual rights and limiting government power. But in order to do that, Republican candidates need to step up to the plate and balance the slate. Listen to this. Of the 40 Senate seats on the 2024 ballot, 5 Republicans won, and 27 Democrat seats went unchallenged. Of the 160 House seats, 25 Republicans won, and 107 Democrat seats went unchallenged, just unopposed. The Marshfield Republican Town Committee has invited one of those House Republicans, though, who did run against a Democrat and won, State Representative Ken Sweezey. Ken is going to share with us his story about deciding to run for office. Ken is not a lawyer, he's not a millionaire, but he organized a successful campaign against many odds, and he won. We appreciate that Ken will share his story. We feel it can serve as inspiration to attract other Republican candidates to run for office. If we don't balance the legislature, we will not lower taxes or lower energy costs and the cost of living in general. And we will not get the responsive government that Massachusetts was designed to have. Thanks again for being with us today. So would you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, did you always have a burning desire to run for state office, or did something in your business experience or life experience trigger a desire?
Yep.
Say, I'm going to run.
Yeah, well, first off, Mary Beth and the Marshfield Republican Town Committee, thank you so much for hosting this show. It's so important that we have these conversations, and I really hope that you at home are enjoying this and feel that you'll be a more informed voter, because that's really so important when we go to the polls. As far as me, my story, so I'm honored to be in my first term here as the state rep for the 6th Plymouth, which, just for everyone's edification, is Duxbury, most of Pembroke, most of Hanson, and then 1 precinct in Halifax and 1 precinct in Marshfield. So honored to represent my 5 communities, and I feel that I serve the entire town. As far as my story and how I came to be in the legislature, it is, as Mary Beth put it, not your typical path. Not a lawyer. I was not involved in politics previously. I did grow up here in the district. I grew up in Hanson. My folks still live over there. And my family runs a small business. I grew up digging fence post holes for my dad and my grandfather. We still operate the business over in Whitman. I did go off to get my degree in forensic science and was a civilian member of the St. Louis Metro Police Department. So I was in the crime lab. I was a fingerprint expert there. And as far as what really started propelling me to get more involved, I saw how crime really affected our communities, even though I was in another state at the time, and I was with the crime lab up until COVID happened, when a lot of small businesses were shuttered. Fortunately, at the time, my family's was not, but many of the people we worked for and with were negatively affected. So it was that small business mindset growing up. I remember I was going into high school when the 2008 financial crisis happened, and we went without. We understand what tight budgets do and how small businesses shrink, and how that negatively affects our communities, our economy, and the families and residents of our district. So that was really the foundation that I started on and sort of built my worldview, especially in economic policy around, and then my time in the crime lab, seeing what public safety, how it can be a positive thing or really a negative thing for your community. So once COVID happened, I moved back, started getting involved. I was fortunate. I was in Hanson again at the time, and I volunteered on the capital improvements and economic development committees there in town, and really got a good sense for local government and just see how our communities, especially in the 6th Plymouth County, and across the Commonwealth, are getting left behind by Boston. And that was really eye-opening, and that's why I decided to throw my hat in the ring. I actually ran in 22, came up a little bit short, and was very proud to come back in 24, run again, cross the finish line, and serve these communities to the best of my ability.
So that is kind of an unconventional way of weaving your career path to where you are today. But it's also one that opens up, I hope, a lot of opportunities for people in similar situations that may not feel directly related to being able to enter public office, but saw how you kind of moved in at the ground level locally, and then made some. But that's very inspirational. Once you did decide to actually run for state rep, how did you approach your campaign? Did you have any mentors? Did you ran as a Republican? Was the state committee involved? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that process? Yeah, so
definitely not being what you would call a political insider or previously involved. This was about as grassroots as it gets. And I know people like to throw that word around a lot, but I truly mean it. There was, for over a year, I declared exactly 1 year before my election back in 22, did the same, nearly the same in 24. And I really can't think of any 2 days in a row that I wasn't in the community meeting people where they're at. And that's, in my view, why my campaigns have been successful in the end. And what is most important, and what we're lacking a lot in politics, is meeting people where they are. Yeah. It's easy for people to turn on the news and see the federal politics and the doom and gloom of DC, but there's a lot of good to be done here in Massachusetts. And I really believe that if people are educated voters and involved, that it's possible to make change. And I know that's a big piece of what we're going to talk about here today. But as far as what I did, I led the state from my understanding for new candidates and doors knocked. I went out in 22. I knocked 4,000 doors on my own. I had volunteers do over another 1,000, so that's over 5,000 doors in 22. In 2024, when we had a really good opportunity to win this seat, my campaign knocked on over 13,000 doors, and I did over 6,000 of them myself. That was basically a full-time job campaigning, because I knew that when I came to you and had a conversation at your door, we were able to speak candidly, speak honestly about the needs of our communities, and I felt that was really important. I was still serving on the boards in Hanson as far as I could before I moved, and understanding what our communities need, going to select boards, understanding volunteering and sponsoring Little League teams and doing things like that, just continuing to dig into the communities that shaped me, that I grew up in, that I'm really, really proud to be a part of. And I think that that pride and the ability to meet people where they're at is ultimately the underlying tone that made me successful. And I was very fortunate to have good mentors as well. We share my district borders with a couple other Republican state reps that were able to kind of show me a little bit of the way as well, particularly Rep. Allison Sullivan Almeida, who's out of Abington. My family, actually, my dad grew up in Abington and knew Allison's dad as well. Funny enough, we grew up a street away from each other. I lived in Abington for the first 6 years of my life, so we knew the Sullivan family, and she's been a really good representative for her district as well, and she's been in since 2018, so she helped, and I think it was people saw a need for change, and we were able to get it done.
So it sounds like people were receptive to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And that's what you found. I mean, when knocking on doors can appear to sound anyway, a little intimidating.
Yep.
Especially if did you introduce yourself as a Republican candidate? Did you say you're a conservative candidate? Did you say anything at all? You're just your name? I mean, and people were welcoming to you.
Yeah, when I started running to that point, when I declared in 2021, I was 27 years old. And I thought, people may not take me seriously on the surface. I mean, at the time, as I mentioned, I was just coming off of being with the St. Louis Metro Police Department. I mean, I worked nearly 250 homicides in the 4 years I was there.
Wow.
I mean, some serious life experiences for a 27-year-old, as well as my appointed government experience in the town of Hanson. But it was the complete opposite. People loved having a fresh voice. And if you respect the voters with your competence, they will listen to you. And I dug in. I enjoy policy. I enjoy the issues that actually matter. It's not about ideology. It's not about platitudes. It doesn't even really have to be about party. I'm proud to be a member of the Republican Party, but I don't define myself that way. I define myself as someone who grew up in the 6th Plymouth District, who lives in our communities, who understands the needs of our communities. And I think that is what the voters really appreciate. I mean, to the point about Massachusetts, you talk about the small numbers in the legislature. I mean, in Massachusetts, there's only 8% of the population is registered Republicans. And it's only about 25% that's registered Democrats. And everyone else, about 65%, is independents or unenrolled, as we call them in Massachusetts. And some people make a mistake, I think, because they believe, oh, well, if you're independent, you must be in the middle. And I think what's really happening in Massachusetts is that people are fed up with party politics. They want you to come and talk to them like a person, like a neighbor, understand the real issues, offer real solutions, and represent their voice in Boston and not the other way around. And I think over the last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to do that. That's how I grounded my campaigns, how I'll ground my next one. But speaking to everybody, and I feel I represent everybody.
So, well, two things crossed my mind when you were speaking. There are some people who express themselves in a very negative fashion about any sort of conservative attitude. I mean, did you encounter any of that kind of feedback? And how did you deal with it if you did?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, we're not all going to agree on every issue, and I understand that. There's a place for disagreement. It's healthy. Do you agree with your spouse every time you have a conversation over dinner? Of course not. Disagreement can be very healthy. I have very good friends on the other side of the aisle because I believe that there is a place for that. I'm proud to get up and be one of the reps that debates on the floor, and I can still have a friendly conversation with my opponent afterwards. But as far as pushback, yeah, I certainly went up to doors and people asked, oh, if you're a Republican, I got doors, slammed in my face. I had all sorts of things, profanities, and we'll never vote for you, and that's fine. That is totally fine. That's part of politics. Unfortunately, that's the way it is these days. But I mean it when I say I represent everybody. And for anyone I've had a conversation with or not had a conversation with, I hope that you feel represented, at least in some way, can always come to me. And there are issues we agree on. There are certainly issues and that would be considered more liberal or democratic ideals, and some that I might disagree with my own party on. And that's totally fine as well. So there is always room for common ground, and I really do seek that out. So of course there's going to be negative pushback at times, but that's just part of doing business.
What were some of the things that you heard from people when your first time around, when you started talking to them about maybe some of the things that they were unhappy with in state government? Do you recall, some?
Yeah, I think
comments?
It's still, unfortunately, some of the similar things that we hear today. I mean, we have this massive affordability crisis. We have a massive transparency crisis, one of the least transparent state houses in the whole nation. And unfortunately, many of these things haven't really changed. We can go up there and, I debate on the floor and try to shine a light on these things, but with only 25 members, as you pointed out of 160, it can be challenging at times. So that's the voice that I want to represent, those that feel, and we're teetering on this edge where people in Massachusetts almost feel hopeless and like giving up. Yeah. And that is the number one thing I try to drive home, whether it's a one-on-one conversation at your door, a great conversation that we're having here, or any event that I'm at across the district or on Beacon Hill, is that Massachusetts is not lost. I truly believe this, although we're in a period right now where one-party rule is, in my view, devastating, our economy, our families, our towns. There's always a way back, and it is never hopeless, and it can't just be doom and gloom, and I recommend turning off the evening news. And I have an opportunity to go out and meet a lot of young people in our district, whether it's through youth sports, Cub Scouts, honor roll, things like that. And we have great, great young people in this district and in the Commonwealth. And I truly believe that Massachusetts is in for a brighter future. We have to hold the line. We have to make sure that young people can afford a home, can get a job, that we're looking out for the residents that are here. And I believe if we do that successfully, that Massachusetts will be better off. So a lot of people have those pushbacks on those big things, and they feel that it's hopeless, but it isn't.
Good. That's very good to hear. Was there anything about being a candidate that surprised you? I mean, any experience that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I didn't expect how much positive feedback I got from my age at first. Like I said, when I ran, I was quite young. Even now, I believe I'm the 12th youngest member of the entire body.
Oh, nice.
Between the House and the Senate. I'm still on the younger side, and there's obviously members. There's a couple Gen Z members now. We just had our first Gen Z elected last cycle with me as well. So I think people appreciate experience, and they appreciate competency. They appreciate you showing up. It's not all, age or anything else. The experience itself actually matters, which was a pleasant surprise. So I think there was a lot of good that comes out of being a candidate, and no matter the time, no matter the setbacks, it's really worthwhile. And I know you mentioned that we always are recruiting for good candidates, and that goes for the town level as well. There's boards in Marshfield, I'm sure, but across the district that some appointed boards are empty, and I really encourage people to reach out and get involved at the local level or run for state rep or whatever it may be across the Commonwealth, because it's so important to be involved.
Yes, it's because when I think of things like this and the seats that went unopposed, uncontested, I mean, I can imagine that is a frustration to, people who are on the Republican side, and some of them who really do strictly vote Republican. Right. It can look a little bit hopeless. Were there lessons that you learned you ran twice?
Yep.
Were there lessons that you learned from the first time that came to help you the second time around?
Yeah, absolutely. Doing the work is so important, which is a great transition into having the role itself and being a state rep. You have to do the work, and that goes true for candidates. I knew candidates that were very competent and great people, but they didn't knock on a single door, and they didn't cross the finish line. And that's not the end-all, be-all, but doing the work is important. Meeting people where there are. It's unfortunate, in my view, that you have to pay such close attention to your state government, or else they're going to essentially be stealing your money from you or enacting policies that negatively affect your business, your family, or your towns. It's unfortunate that we have to pay such close attention, but we see what happens when state government runs amok. So, I learned that you have to meet people where they are, because when you have a young family or you're retired, you're going to church every Sunday, you're going to Little League and your daughter's ballet, it's hard to keep up with ever-changing local and state government. So I really make it a point of myself to go out and meet people where they are. Just, you can't rely on everybody to be up on the issues all the time. It's a lot. So that's a really important thing that I think rings true. But that competency and understanding, what's right for Marshfield, Duxbury, and Hanson, Halifax, and Pembroke is all different.
Yes.
You have to know your communities. It's not one size fits all. That's why I'm a big proponent of local control. That's why I'm such a strong advocate for our schools and our public safety agencies up on Beacon Hill, because the entire state's not Boston. Our communities are unique. They have unique character, unique residents, and we need to protect that. We need to protect that, and it's important that we have our town's voice represented up in Boston and not the other way around.
And that to me is representative government.
Yeah.
And I do see you in the community, and I see some of your colleagues in the community too, and I'm proud of it, and I can understand how it's very important, and it brings to mind that on the ballot, the 2026 ballot, there were, I believe, 44 initiatives that the Attorney General approved. 44 initiatives. I mean, that meant that the people of Massachusetts did not believe that its legislature was doing its job when they had 44 initiatives. Not all made it to the ballot. I think we ended up with something like 11. But still, those are the issues that, I'm not going to disparage anyone, but representatives who don't use the same practice that you do are missing out. They don't know what their people want anymore. Our voices aren't heard.
Yeah, it's likely that we are going to set the record for most ballot questions ever in Massachusetts, and it's exactly your point. I mean, we move so slowly, so inefficiently. And some, obviously, there's complex legislation that takes time. You want to go through the public hearing process so people can participate, but we are notorious for being an inefficient and slow-moving legislature, even amongst the other states. I mean, there were states that passed their budget before I even met on my first committee hearing last year. I mean, we move slowly, and I think that, to your point, exactly right, that the ballot question volume is a reflection of that.
Yes, good. We are encouraging candidates to step up to the plate. And what would you say for them to think about is the biggest obstacle for Republican candidates in a blue state? What should they be prepared for?
Yeah, I think as far as Republicans specifically for candidates, there's a national brand, of course, and like I alluded to earlier, I don't prescribe to everything that's in the RNC platform. You may not, and that's perfectly fine. I think you can be grounded in Republican ideals while representing your specific communities, whether that's Marshfield, Duxbury, or my other towns, like I mentioned. Like I say to everybody, I'm a Ken Sweezey Republican. I'm a 6th Plymouth Republican. I believe I have a foundation of Republican ideals like small government, independence, liberty, and that guides me as I do the right things for the district. So I think that in Massachusetts, it's a fact, right? I mean, Harris won by over 20 points. At the federal side, it is what it is, but it can be different on the state level. As you pointed out with the graph, we've had a lot of Republican governors, and there's an appetite to not have one-party rule, to not have all three branches of government controlled by Democrats. There is a lot of center-right, fiscally minded people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and if you speak to the people and your district specifically, not national agendas, not party agendas, if you represent your constituents, even if you have an R next to your name, you can succeed.
Yes, that's really good to hear. So I'm thinking about, now you've won. That must have been a good feeling.
It was much better than losing, I'll tell you that. 24 was much more fun.
Yeah, right, okay. And now you're actually in the legislature. And you're not a lawyer. You have a different background.
Yeah.
And now you're in this entire lawmaking body. What did that what did that feel like? I mean, how can you talk a little bit about your first year in the legislature relative to being new and not having a legal background?
Yeah, it's certainly at times been a whirlwind. Fortunately now I think I have my feet firmly on the ground and I feel really comfortable in there. And I think that's the point. The state legislatures are such a unique part of American democracy, truly, the labs of democracy as they're called at times, because they're meant to be filled with citizen legislatures, not professional politicians,
Yes,
not
that's a
lawyers.
great
I mean, you can
point.
read all you want about, the John Adams of history, but there's many, many more men and women that have served that were regular everyday citizens. And I think that's a really important dynamic. I mean, I serve with people that don't have bachelor degrees. There's a medical doctor that was a freshman, like I said, a Gen Z, and many other local officials that now moved up, if you will, to the state level. And I think it's meant to be a diverse group, and diverse in everything, racially, ethnically, religiously, professionally, age-wise. I think it's meant to truly represent and be a cross-section of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's really important. So, it's been no problem that I haven't been a lawyer. I still was able to file more bills than any other freshman in the legislature because, again, understanding your communities is the most important. I think I do a good job of that. I try to make sure that my 5 towns are represented up there. So, the first year, it's, you got to get your feet wet fast, and it's interesting being a freshman legislator in Massachusetts. For example, me and the other 18 freshman legislators shared a conference room for almost 3 months in the basement of the State House. They didn't give us offices until the end of March. I got sworn in January 1st. So it was, a good opportunity for that camaraderie that I think is important with the other side of the aisle at times and building that rapport. But it's interesting when people come and visit you from the district, and we were in a conference room with 19 other people, and our staffers. So being a freshman legislator is interesting, but it was a great experience, and I'm glad to be heading towards the end of this first session.
Okay, that sounds good. So one of the major detriments to one-party rule is that there is no opposition voice. And some of the bills, maybe talk a little bit about some of the bills that maybe you brought to the table knowing that they would not come to fruition, but just because you have the need to express the other viewpoint. And mention maybe a couple of those bills and, talk a little bit about how, with an opposition view, that may have turned out differently. Yeah. A better solution for the people of the state.
Yeah, so that's, a great example always is, we're essentially completely shut out of the committee process, which is where bills, the first step, if you watch Schoolhouse Rock, bills have to go through committee, then usually they're before the budget committee, before one of the chambers, House or Senate, votes on it, then it goes to the other chamber. So it's a very long process, and it can take months, especially in Massachusetts. But, all the chairs and vice chairs of every single House, Senate, and joint committee are all Democrats appointed by the Speaker or the Senate President. So we do serve on the committees. I serve on 5 committees, and I'm fortunate some of the chairs are generous with our time and do allow us to have input, but they don't have to. They don't have to because they have the numbers to such a degree that they really don't have to take in the opposition view most of the time. And I take the committee process very seriously. It's my opportunity to ask the hard questions about other legislators that might be submitting legislation, or the governor in her office. I've multiple times questioned the governor about her spending priorities when she's come before my committees, as well as sheriffs, locally elected officials, and advocates. So the committee process is important, and that's one way I try to get my voice in. But to your point, many of the bills that myself and my colleagues have submitted don't make it through that first round of that committee process. We do have over 7,000 bills that get filed every session, so it is quite a bit. So most bills don't make it through there, but the bills that do, we could always have a little bit more input. I think the way that, being in the super minority, as Republicans, we have a bigger opportunity is when we do bring a vote on the floor, we have an opportunity to amend the bill from the floor, and we often do that. I have done that multiple times, whether through the state budget, when we were tackling energy prices a few weeks ago in 2026, and a whole bunch of other issues where we offer up amendments that may have made the bill mostly good, but we don't have an opportunity to even be in the room to have those conversations sometimes because it's so ideological from the other side. So I think there's always an opportunity for more back and forth, more dialogue, and I certainly hope that if we pick up a few more seats, that might be an opportunity for us in the future.
Yeah, I think it sounds like the people would be better served.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So we are the Marshfield Republican Town Committee, and we encourage Republican candidates to throw their hats into the ring. Would you want to share any insight, Ken, on how we might attract more younger people to get interested? You know, I see this. I know for myself, I didn't take politics seriously when I was in my 30s and 40s. I was doing other things.
Right.
And then it kind of wakes you up to the fact of, hey, you know, there's something here that is happening that, oh, I'm not really happy about this, you know? And you start to then make time and think about it. Is there anything that, you know, that comes to mind that could kind of draw younger people into being more interested and aware of?
Yeah, a couple different things. So there's two routes that I would say for that specifically, because, you know, we do live in, you know, I'd say a right of center, very purple district. There's plenty of people that are qualified and could run for town or state offices in the area. I think, one, I think we do a very bad job sometimes on our side of equating, hey, you're struggling to pay your utility bills because of this policy that you may or may not have supported in the past that has another consequence. I think at times we don't do as good of a job at that. And I think this year, as I've been in the legislature and tried to amend those bills and make my case on the floor, I've tried very hard to do that. I think sometimes when people understand, oh yeah, I'm voting for governor, I'm voting for XYZ, you know, there's real policy ramifications for these things. We have to understand that, you know, we can't just do politics as usual. You know, there's nothing wrong with being registered with a party one way or the other, being unenrolled, but we have to understand that these things do affect our lives. I really do believe that COVID really woke a lot of people up to this. We saw how even, you know, how many people watching this knew who was on their board of health before 2020? Probably almost nobody, right? But I think we understood that, you know, the local politics, the state politics really do matter. And having that foundation that I was talking about earlier, you know, I have Republican ideals, and that's my foundation, generally speaking, with small government, liberty, you know, aiding in the pursuit of happiness. If someone has those ideals, they can serve on the Board of Health, they can serve on the Select Board, they can run for state rep, state senate. And I think that's important for people to understand. You don't have to be, you know, this lawyer, this ideologue, or this, you know, subject matter expert. These positions are made for citizens and residents of the districts and the towns that we live in. That is their design, to have your input. You don't have to be a subject matter expert. So I really, really can't encourage people enough to get involved. And yes, you might be the president of Little League or never miss one of your kids' or grandkids' ballet classes, but there's still an opportunity to serve. And I really, really encourage people to do so. But in order to do so, people need to have that hope in the future. Yes. You know, I think it's important that if we want younger people to be involved, it needs to be clear that there is a path for them to afford a home, that there is a path for them to get a good paying job in this district or close by, and that they can live here, that their property taxes and their income taxes aren't going to crush their family's financial future. The last two friends that I've had from high school that grew up locally, that have bought houses, were in New Hampshire. And I don't blame them for them and their family, but we need to be able to hold the line and still fight for a Massachusetts that everybody can afford to live in. And I believe that that is possible. I truly believe that. If you believe that, then I think that we should all fight that together. Town level, state level, federal level. There's an opportunity to be involved there. Big, small time commitments, and it is an option, but we have to make it so.
Yeah, it's true. And when you were talking about your foundation, your principal foundation, whether or not you're wearing an R on your t-shirt is not the primary. It is the foundation, the principles in which you believe. That reminds me, what came to my mind is a lot of, if people assume that attitude, I think we'd have less bickering among Republicans who call themselves she's a rhino, he's a rhino, or this one's that. They get hung up on these smaller issues that they may disagree with someone. I can't think of anything at the moment, but you might feel differently about someone, but that does not mean your foundation has been cracked. You still believe in principled leadership, the same principles of the Republican Party. Yeah. But you may demonstrate them a little bit differently in different situations. And I think the tolerance among Republicans to understand that, I think understanding that would create tolerance among Republicans. Yeah. And the other thing, the Republicans do have the Young Republicans. Yep. And that's, it's a pretty dynamic group. I've met a few people, and you're a young Republican, but I think they start at age 18. Yep. And I think if anyone, or if a child of someone in a family, 18, 19, has an inclination to inquire about maybe a political life, to start at the Young Republican level. Yeah. And I think it's a good way to start to absorb some of those foundational principles. Yep. That make us one group of people, but who may feel differently about certain issues. I think personally that's okay. Marching in lockstep is not my style.
Right. Yeah, I view myself much more as like a Walmart greeter in the party and not a gatekeeper. Yeah. I think we are strongest when we are the big tent party, and I think there's an opportunity to be that again.
Would you have any suggestions for the Marshfield Republican Town Committee, how we can help new candidates? Should they come our way? Should someone say, gee, we heard Ken talking, and I'm kind of interested in this. What would be a first step?
Yeah, the support at the grassroots level is so important. I think you guys already do. The Marshfield group does a really good job. Anyone watching this certainly is a town election voter, and I'm sure that they see you at the polls. You guys do a great job. No, if there is anyone looking to step up locally or at the state level, understand that you have a group here that wants to make Marshfield the best place that it can be. And I feel lucky as an elected that represents Marshfield that they're here to do so. And I think reaching out, joining the group is such a good start. Not that we're doing an infomercial here, but really I can't encourage enough to join your local RTC, particularly the Marshfield RTC. When these groups are big, they can really have an impact on local elections and state elections, and that's really important. So, getting the fundraising together, having the grassroots volunteers to hold signs and knock doors and be at events and spread the word is so important. That organic support is really, really important, and I think Marshfield has a really good foundation for that. So if you're a candidate looking to get involved, even if you're less ideological or political per se, but if you do have that foundation, I think this is a great group to get started with.
And kudos to the state of Massachusetts, who have had some frustration with it, but it's structured that way. We have the parties, both Democrat, Republican, at the state level, and then each community has a Republican and a Democrat local committee. Yep. I think a lot of people don't even know that.
No, most people don't. When I tell people that when I say, go talk to the RTC, they have no idea what that is.
What RTC is.
Or anything. So I encourage everybody to get involved.
So if you, would you have one piece of advice to a new candidate entering a race?
Yeah, show up. You got to show up. If people don't see you except on your mailers, or they don't see you except for when you're asking for something like their vote, people see me out getting ice cream at Heidi's in Hanson, or on the beach in Duxbury, or running the St. Patrick's Day 5K in Marshfield. I'm not asking for anything. I'm a member of these communities. I'm your neighbor, and I really take that part of my job very seriously. It's important. You got to show up. That's the way you understand the needs. I have better conversations getting ice cream and running races than I do, when I'm talking to other locally elected officials. That's where you understand what the average resident thinks. That's what you understand. We can talk about snow removal along the course of the Marshfield 5K. That's where you get the real things. Going to the select board meetings or planning meetings and the town meetings in general, being out there on election day. You got to show up and do the work. That's the most important thing about being a candidate, especially a first time.
Well, I'm very glad that you showed up today, and
Thank you
certainly did. You gave us some terrific insight into how people can move into running for office. I mean, we need to take away those unopposed seats and fill them with the good people that we know are out there. Is there anything we haven't discussed that, in closing, that you would like to have our audience know?
Yeah, of course. Just know, I think that what's really important, we talk a lot about policy and campaigning and things like that, and at least 51% of my job is constituent services. So even if, being a candidate isn't for you, if there's anything that I can do to help on a granular level, please let me know. I think we'll have my contact information, ability to share. Reach out to me or my staff. I mean, we help people with unemployment and the RMV and SNAP benefits and VA benefits and things like that. Navigating state government is a big part of my job, and I'm here to help because, if we can't look out for one another and be neighborly, then the policy all falls by the wayside and it's irrelevant. So I think that that's something that we need to understand as well, that although we're policy-driven organizations perhaps at the party level, really what we're doing is trying to look out for our neighbors. And I think that's a really important part about politics that we need to get back with. But I can't thank the Marshfield RTC, you Mary Beth, enough for spreading this message, doing this work. This is all volunteer. What you guys do is so important, even beyond the party politics, to just civically engage our neighbors. And I think that's so important. And the more you can do that, whether it is sitting next to someone in a pew on Sunday or when you're at your grandkids' Little League game or softball game and just say, hey, what do you think about this issue in town or this election, this race? Having those organic conversations with people you trust is a really important part, because if you're just behind a screen on social media, the discourse can get really nasty, and there's really no need for that. When we talk to each other like neighbors, I really do believe that compromise is possible and we can make better towns and a state for ourselves.
Well, we have so many good people, not only in Marshfield, but in all the South Shore and all the surrounding towns. Sometimes it frustrates me that I'm talking with someone and I say, she should run for office. He should run for office. Why aren't they doing that? And there's a trail of excuses. So maybe this can inspire some people that it's doable, and they can really help to continue to keep our communities with the high quality of life that we enjoy. One party rule it's un-American, and we've lived with high taxes and high fees long enough. But it's up to us to change it. And my question to viewers out there is, won't you be part of the change? So we hope they will be, and we certainly thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
So in closing, we thank our producer, Dave Kohler, our assistant producer, Mary Gill, who are both members of the Marshfield Republican Town Committee. And of course, we thank the Marshfield Community Media Studio and the great staff that they have here who help us. So until we meet again, just remember, if you're an American, vote like one. Thank you.